And welcome back in Stripe Show podcast brought to you by OnCore Golf. OnCore designs high-performance golf balls for players of all skill levels and swing speeds. We've made it, folks. It is the FedEx Cup Playoffs. We're down to 3. It used to be 4, but it's 3 events now. As we look ahead, we're going to start with the Northern Trust at a great golf course, Liberty National, and then we move to a new course, Caves Valley, in Maryland. That'll be the BMW, and then the top 30. We'll take it down to Atlanta, of course, the Tour Championship at the famous Eastlake. So this is fun for me. I enjoy the playoffs. They've grown on me over the years. But anytime you can get the top players playing together for 4 rounds, sign me up, and that's what we're going to have here over the next 3 weeks. But I want to look back briefly here at the Wyndham Championship. Of course, a lot of guys trying to get in, so we got to throw a lot of names around here today, folks, on the PGA Tour, and no better guy to help us break this down, make sense of it, tell us some stories than the senior editor at PGAtour.com. He's back, Sean Martin. Thanks for joining me, my man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Lots to get through. Always so many cool stories this time of year. And we're just talking PGA Tour. I was watching last night the 25 guys that got their card from the Korn Ferry Tour. And that's always a cool ceremony to see that, because you're changing lives literally right there. But even to some degree here, when you look down into the 125, and I want to start with a guy that made it right on the number. Chesson Hadley, great interview that he had with Amanda Balionis at CBS. You're pretty close to these guys. You get to ask questions. You see it. It means a lot, right? When you sneak in that 125 versus 126, it just came pouring out. Pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, to do it the way he did it with that hole-in-one, and it's crazy too with Wyndham. It's not the first time we've seen a guy, make an ace to crack the top 125. Martin Flores did it a few years earlier as well. And I mean, and first ace of his lifetime for Chesson Hadley. So definitely well-timed. And he still needed Justin Rose to bogey 18 just to get his card by a single point. And, it's so dramatically different for those two players. Chesson Hadley, he's got conditional status if he doesn't crack the top 125. Justin Rose is still exempt off his FedEx Cup victory, his win at Torrey Pines a couple of years ago. And obviously he is secure financially. But yeah, so for Chesson, I mean, that's huge. That's job security. Mm-hmm. That's, paychecks for his family. He's got young kids. That's, so much more than just making it in the playoffs. I mean, that is a big thing in his life. And he talked about his job. He hasn't been very good at his job the last few years. And I think that's where people can really relate. It's hard when you're not performing well at work, or when your job is a source of frustration. And that's the case for professional golfers as well.
Yeah, Justin missed 2 6-footers down the stretch.
Yep.
On the final 2 holes. That dropped him out from, I think he was 119 to 126. Yeah. There's Chesson having to watch all that. His fate lies in someone else's hands. And all of a sudden he gets a tap and he's like, hey, you're in. You just made it at 125. Incredible.
Yeah, you don't wish ill on anybody,
No.
But at the same time, it would have felt so weird for the guy who makes the ace to not get in. Like, the guy who makes the ace has to get in. It has to work that way.
You got any aces, Sean?
Yeah. 2.
2? That's what I got.
Both with a 3-iron.
What? With a 3?
Yeah, so go figure.
Wow.
That's a long time ago, though.
That's doubly impressive. You knock it down with the 3-iron. Yeah, that's hard to believe, right? Chesson, his first hole-in-one. You think about how skilled he is, and he's never made a hole-in-one. Just shows you how much luck is involved when you get a player of that skill that's never made one. But anyway, he's in.
Totally.
Yeah, he's in. He's at Liberty National. He's getting ready. There's 3 guys that are not there. Sean, what surprised you the most here? 3 guys that didn't make it into the playoffs. I'll start with Justin Rose. We just talked about him at 126. And then let's see. Where'd Ricky go? There's Ricky. He's not in. And then Tommy Fleetwood is not in. Those are the 3 names that I look at, and Don't
forget your silver medalist.
Well,
I mean, that's one event that didn't count during the standings. And CT Payne was on the bubble too. You almost had your silver and bronze medalists not even make the playoffs, which, I mean, look, And
Yeah.
that's a year maker, making your Olympic, getting an Olympic medal, but still it would have been just odd having those two on the sidelines.
Yeah, that's
while the
true.
playoffs going.
What surprises you the most out of those names that didn't make it?
I think Rose, because he seemed to be trending upward. He got kind of lost a little bit with equipment, and then he went on his own as a swing coach. Then he was going back to his TaylorMade stuff. And then he went back with Schauffele. So you kind of felt like going back to the old stuff you're starting to see some positive trends. And then he just fell short there at the end. Ricky had the top 10 at the PGA, and I think a good showing at Memorial. It looked like he was going to turn it around, but obviously still not quite there. But I think the big one, the big one really for me was Rose. And Ricky, it's interesting. Can Ricky turn the putter around? Obviously, the full swing is a big source of talking, but Ricky's putting numbers are way down this year as well.
Yeah, as of late, Ricky seemed to be a little more of himself with the flat stick, but the swing changes that he went through just haven't panned out to this point.
Yep.
And there's been probably been the better part of 16 months, maybe 18 months, I think, since the changes. So there's a lot to consider there for Ricky on which way he's going to go. But I probably tend to agree with Rose, major championship winner. It's weird for me, Sean, because, and I've said this on the pod, Justin Rose is such a great guy. Payne Stewart Award winner, just announced last week. So deserving. One of the most genuine, nicest family, really, that I've met as far as the players. He strikes me as someone who, very process oriented, find what works, stick with it, turn the wheels, stay consistent. And then all of a sudden, Justin Rose just kind of starts doing things that are I was like, it's almost a little uncharacteristic, changes the equipment when he was the number one player in the world, leaves fully after the pandemic when he was down in the Bahamas, who they've had a great run. Justin, technical player. Sean can talk the technicalities. And then all of a sudden, Justin's game is gone. It just felt uncharacteristic to me to some degree that Justin was kind of making these decisions. You see it that way?
Yeah, a little bit. I think the pandemic had a lot to do with it. I think, travel and moving around was so difficult. We saw with Adam Scott as well that just, moving around the globe, trying to move between countries and play going between countries was so difficult that I really think that guys who were living internationally, it had a greater impact on them than maybe guys who could just stay in the United States. I think that's part of it as well. Adam Scott, he won it Riviera last year before the pandemic, was, looked like he was still, very competitive at basically the same age as Justin Rose. They've had very parallel kind of career paths. And he got kind of worn down by it as well and was really kind of struggling. He had to play well to keep himself in the playoffs. And that's why he was at Wyndham, and that's why he was in that playoff as well, and unfortunately missed that 4-footer. But I think the pandemic was a big part of that.
Yeah, for sure. Everything's changed, right? When you go through the pandemic and, you just have to start thinking differently, I guess. So anyway, they stay home and the rest move on. Adam Scott was a name that I kind of pushed down my board a little bit when I was doing my picks. We talked about him a lot. The thing that really pushed me away was, his struggle with the driver. He drove the ball better. His iron game was on point. He had a chance to win right there. Knocked that in from inside 4 feet. Adam Scott makes that
straight up the hill too.
Here, Sean, here's what I was really shocked about with Adam Scott's putt. Okay, so the guy, so who's is it Brandon Grace that had the putt right next to him? I think it was Grace,
yes.
wasn't it?
Yep.
So Grace is right there. I mean, virtually the same line. And Adam Scott's standing way over there. He's he's not even standing there trying to get a little look-see.
Yeah.
What? I mean,
I saw a tweet from Adam's fellow Australian, Nick McKay, who's the head coach at Georgia State there in Atlanta and very active on Twitter. And he said Adam had missed that putt as soon as he pulled out the greens book for a 4-footer up the hill that someone had just attempted.
It's wow. I mean, the whole thing was bizarre. I remember I'm watching, and then there's a great camera shot and Adam is way off in the distance standing with the rest of the guys. It almost felt like, when you're in a scramble and everyone's got to hit the same shot and you got to turn your back and you can't see.
Yeah.
What it kind of felt like.
That was the thing with the playoffs.
Why isn't Adam over there looking at this?
I thought the sixum was a cool idea, and that's the way I've always done it. But it was such a long wait for him to hit that putt. I think I saw on Twitter it was 12 minutes from when he hit the shot to hitting the putt. And because guys had to get up and down from everywhere on that first hole, and we're making a mess of it and whatnot. And so hitting a shot 12 minutes later, it can't help, especially a shot to win.
No. Wow. You got to live with that. That's tough. All right, let's move on here because, the run to the Tour Championship, it begins now, Northern Trust. And Patrick Reed, last time we saw Liberty National, he won here back in 2019. Liberty's a good course, par 71, about 7,400 yards. And you start breaking it down and how the guys did here in 19 and before. You got to have the complete game here. They're going to start testing you now, complete tee to green game. You get on the greens here, you get back to the bent grass. So the best players are here inside the top 125. There's Chesson. As I start scrolling up here, Kuchar squeaks in at 120. And there's Woodland, not a great year at 114. I start thinking about some guys here now that have to make a move, right? Because you got to get inside the top 70 to continue to Caves Valley. Jason Day, probably a name that you're looking at, perhaps at 110. Is there any there in the hundreds and just under that you're like, yeah, watch out for this guy because I could see him making the move inside the top 70?
You always think of Jason Day as a chance. I saw his 3 top 10s this year were his fewest since 2009. Started the year working with Chris Como, Bryson's guy. He became an equipment-free agent, so he can play whatever he wants. And so you thought maybe some of those adjustments would help. But, of course, the big question is always the back. I think Garrick Higo at 104, a guy that you picked his win. He's only made 7 starts. So being at 104, you'd expect higher from a guy that won.
Right.
He won, obviously, just his second start on tour at the Palmetto Championship. But at the same time, he was playing in Europe, and he wasn't even a member when he won. So he's only made 7 starts. But a guy who can make a move, you could see, I think he won 3 times in 5 starts worldwide when he won the Palmetto. So a guy who can get hot and actually played the Junior President's Cup at Liberty National in 2017. So has a little bit of course history perchance, and kind of crazy that only 4 years ago he was playing a junior tournament there, and now he's a tour winner.
Yeah, Higo, people that follow the podcast, they know I'm a Higo homer, and was kind of telling people like, look, this kid's coming over. He's a great European Tour player, and he wins Palmetto. And then he's kind of struggled a little since. He missed the cut at the U.S. Open, missed the cut at the Travelers, missed the cut at the Open. It'll be interesting to see how Higo handles himself here. He's a talented young player. There's no question. I'm certainly pulling for him. I think he's a cool kid. The one that I look at, I like Seamus Power at 73. I think Seamus Power, he didn't play great on the weekend last week, but he's been playing very well. I think he's a complete player. Had the win in the opposite field event, Barbasol. And I think Seamus will continue the good play. I like to see him make the jump up there. And Poulter's name jumps out at me too, Sean, at 79. I just, we're getting closer to the Ryder Cup, man. Like, Poulter shows signs of really good play. I wouldn't be surprised to see Ian Poulter make the move as well. Now you go inside the top 70 and, the points are worth more now as you get into the playoffs. You got to keep that in mind. There can be a lot of shifts here. I think a name that jumps out at me inside the top 70 that concerns me a little is Terrell Hatton. Like, Hatton has underachieved, I feel like, this year to some degree. When a few years ago, he was like in like DFS plays. He was great 7,500 guy because you could kind of see this building. And now that he's kind of become that guy, and I know that he goes to Europe and he's had a win over there, but it just feels like he's underperformed to some degree in Hatton. He concerns me a little just inside the top 70. What do you say?
Oh, last year he was one of the best players in the world. I mean, winning Arnold Palmer Invitational, winning the BMW PGA. I mean, he had established himself pretty solidly in the top 10. I think I'm surprised to see Mac Hughes at 67. Just he's been in contention in the last couple of majors, and I would have expected to see him higher. So I think a guy that can definitely make that move. He's played so well. He finished 15th at the U.S. Open, 6th at the Open Championship, and really he was on a tough run before that, but he's really turned it around before the playoffs. And outside that top 70, I've got to go back to Adam Scott. I was looking at his record, and a quiet year for him, but only one missed cut in 18 starts, which I think you would hear guys say a lot of times, and they feel like they're close. There's not a lot of maybe great golf per se, and but there's nothing really bad either. And so just need a couple things to go your way. Maybe saw that at the Wyndham. Adam Scott won at Liberty National in 2013. So a guy that, I think could jump into the top 70 as well, that maybe we're going to start to see that turn around and see Adam Scott that we thought we'd see after he won at Riviera.
You talk about what we're talking about is playing your way in or on your way out. And a guy that played his way in last week was Roger Sloan.
Yep. That was a gutsy performance. Not like, Sunday, you're trying to win your first PGA Tour event and keep your card. It's like double pressure, and he handled it great.
He did. He's a name that you're starting to see a little bit more as well. He was 131 coming in. He's 92nd. So can he keep good play going? Kramer Hickok in there at 90. We saw him at the Travelers in that great showdown that went back and forth there. That was an amazing tournament. With, I'm drawing a blank, Harris?
Yep. That was Harris' second
English.
one.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Adam Scott, he was 121, made the move all the way up to 82nd. Harold Varner's played well here. Harold Varner's got to like his chances, I would think. He's actually played Eastlake pretty well at 72nd, Bubba at 71, and then JT Poston is the guy on the line right now at 70. Aaron Wise is interesting to me at 61. Got to be frustrating. Guys like Aaron Wise at 61, Doug Gim, he's at, Doug Gim's at 86. These are two guys that are just ball striking machines. I mean, fabulous ball strikers. They're all good ball strikers, but when you compare them to their peers, they're exceptional. And their putters are just chilly more times than not. And here they are. They've played they're at 80 and 60, really ball striking their way, living at the bottom from a putting perspective. I always look at guys like that who can get their tee to green, and then you just kind of wait for those weeks maybe where they just get a run of that hot putter. And those are two names that jump out to me. Get a hot putter for a week or two. They can hit it good enough, Sean, to get to Eastlake. There's no question about that.
Yep. And then I think Phil at 58 is safe, but this is the one playoff event with a cut, so you can go home with 0 points, and some wild things can happen. And next to him is Matthew Wolff, who obviously took that big pause this season for the mental health break and to kind of reset, which, Wolff's the kind of guy who, if he can go on a tear in the playoffs, I could see him possibly getting a Ryder Cup pick. I mean, he performed so well before he went on that break at the U.S. Open, getting into the final group, shooting 65 on Saturday, tons of talent. Obviously, so much pressure on him whenever you're that young, hot prospect, and then you back it up by winning so quickly. But, if he rolls off a couple top tens in the first event and plays well at Eastlake, I think that Ryder Cup picture is pretty wide open. Maybe 2 or 3 slots are open. And so he could be a dark horse Ryder Cup guy if he gets on a hot streak.
Yeah, I like that pick. Guys probably go all the way down to like 55, pretty safe. Inside under 55, I would think they got to feel pretty good. But that cut does make it interesting. This being the first playoff, that's the only cut. Webb's there at 46. Nice to see Webb show some signs. I will buy the stock, Sean, of Webb Simpson. I said it last week going in. I thought the 64 on Sunday, it was the first time, the 64 at the Wyndham. No, excuse me, the 64 the week before the Wyndham coming into that. I thought that was the first time that Webb looked like Webb. Let me rephrase that one more time. It was the 64 on Sunday, the week before the Wyndham, was the first time Webb looked like Webb. And he came in, Sedgefield, of course, is his place. And he played very well on Thursday and Friday. Struggled a little bit on the weekend, but I finally feel like Webb's healthy, and he looks like Webb Simpson again. And at 46, I think Webb's going to keep it going here. I think he's going to make a move. I think we'll see Webb at Eastlake. That's just me.
Yeah, I think that was a tough one at Wyndham. I mean, it's an event he wants so badly to win again. He named his daughter Wyndham. He had the hole out on Sunday. He's been so close. I think he finished third, second in the last 4 years. He hasn't been outside the top three. And then so you have the hole out on 11. You think it's your week. Then you have the short miss at 16. You had the ugly triple the day before. I mean, there's a guy who finished one shot of a playoff with some pretty uncharacteristic stuff. He doubled his first hole of the week, actually, and still had a chance to win. So that really showed, there's a lot of good in there. And then top 20 finishes at the St. Jude, like you said, and the Open Championship. And another guy who I think, especially because of the way he pairs with players, I think a guy that's also playing for a Ryder Cup spot.
Yeah, I want to keep moving up the line here, guys that are probably safe going into next week. And we got you covered here on the podcast all week. Tomorrow we'll do our DFS with Beating the Bookie. We'll break it down, give you our picks. Wednesday, Hudson Swafford will join us from Liberty, who is safely in. And then Thursday, got Jim McLean on, who coaches Russell Henley, who's at 44. Sean, I just feel like Russell. I love Russell. He's one of the best ball strikers on tour. I was all over him with my picks into last week. I thought it was a good spot for him. He's played well, but Russell clearly, I think down the stretch near the lead has shown some nerves. We saw it at the U.S. Open. We really saw it at the Travelers too. He was one back with 4 to play on Sunday, and he doubled 15 and 16.
What a turnaround in his ball striking. I'm interested to hear what Jim McLean says they've been working on, because you're talking about a guy who was kind of rode the putter out on tour and was outside the top 150 in strokes gained approach in 2 of his early seasons on tour, and has kind of steadily climbed each year, and then was 3rd in that stat last year, was 4th this year. So I'm definitely interested to hear what Jim has to say about their work together.
Well, I think a lot of it was just eliminating the hook. Yeah. Russ would hit that occasional hook. But now I think where they're at is Russ is, look, I mean, he's played some good golf this year. He's been right there. He could have clipped off a couple of these, including the U.S. Open. And he bogeyed 4 of his last 8 coming in. This was his tournament. He should have won this tournament. And he bogeyed 4 of the last 8. So there's some things there, I think, feeling the heat. We'll talk about with Jim and how you address something like that when the heat is on and you're trying to win that tournament. I start cruising here now inside the top 40. There's Sergio at 40. Lucas Glover, nice year at 38.
Yep. Another win. That finish there at John Deere was great. And he made Tour Championship in 2019, which people kind of forget, I think, because it's been some quiet years, but then won this year with 5 birdies on his last 7 holes at the John Deere. And you breezed past him. I want to talk about Cameron Shingali. I think a guy who's really turned himself into a good ball striker, kind of like Russell Henley as well. And they're 41st without a win. Some really steady play this year. 4 top 10s, and that doesn't even include a couple times that he contended and struggled on Sundays. Kind of like Russell Henley, you've seen some Sunday struggles from him. The Honda Classic, 3M Open, some chances really to win for the first time. But it is crazy to me. That's a guy who he got his tour card in 2010, and he's had full status on tour every year since. He hasn't won, but to keep a card for that long, especially without the winner's exemption, is not easy. Yeah,
there's some names here that going to come back to the surface here. Charlie Hoffman's one that I think was a hot name there. Played some very consistent golf, got longer off the tee, iron game improved, his putter was solid. He's at 32, so we're going to see him. Connors, the talented Canadian ball striking machine, we're going to see him. And there's Kiz at 29. So I'll ask you, is Kisner? I think Kisner's going to make this Ryder Cup, because that's the name that seems to be sticking out now the most. And it was a hot debate coming in. Now he wins. And it's like, why not Kiz, right? I mean, I'm kind of on the fence, right? Whistling Straits is a big ballpark. But Kisner's been, we know, he's solid match player. He was good at the President's Cup. What do you think?
Yeah, my one thing I say to people who start talking Kisner on the Ryder Cup is just that if you are only picking him based on the win, I don't think you can do that, because basically you're saying Kevin Kisner should be on the Ryder Cup team because Adam Scott missed a 4-foot putt. Now, Kisner stepped up and hit it on the next hole, but that's the problem with basing everything on just victories is that if Adam Scott makes that putt, which is probably from that distance and being uphill, 80% proposition, maybe higher, then Kevin Kisner has no chance to step up on the second playoff hole and do what he did. Now, you've seen some signs of life. He played well at Rocket Mortgage, but you do talk Ryder Cup. I don't really know my Wisconsin October weather, but if you're talking cool weather and Whistling Straits does play long, that's a tough ask for him. He did really well with Phil Mickelson at the President's Cup. They gelled really well together. They seemed to enjoy themselves. They threw in some the Three Amigos dance after victory. So obviously a guy from a team chemistry standpoint that you want there. But I think I'm not going to, fit him for his Team USA uniform quite yet. I think we need to see a couple of good weeks. But the crazy thing too, Kisner, he's made the Tour Championship 5 of the past 6 years. So, it's not Johnny come lately, but I still want to see some work out of him.
Yeah, and it's been in saying that, it's been a bad year for Kisner up till this probably win. He had a couple good finishes there, top 10s, Travelers, and Rocket, but before that, he had 6 missed cuts in 7 weeks. So it's been a tough year for Kisner. Now he comes in, gets it going. Just amazing what a difference a week makes on the PGA Tour. You go back, the WGC St. Jude, he finished 63rd. He lost 9.3 strokes gain approach that week.
Wow.
I mean, that's the week before. You see those numbers, you're like, whoa.
That's easy to do there with all that water. He must have dunked a few. Siwoo, also Siwoo being in the playoff after finishing last at St. Jude and making a 13. So
Siwoo loves Sedgefield too. Though.
He does.
There's horses for courses. I mean, Siwoo's all over Sedgefield. It's probably Webb 1 and Siwoo 1A. Yeah. It's going to be fascinating. I don't think I would pick him. I'm a little bit on the fence with Kiz. I do think I think he's a competitor. He's a fiery spirit. I think there has something to stay with that. But when you're talking about that kind of length in Wisconsin, colder, I do think length is going to play into it. There's not going to be much rough, so they're going to let these guys just hit the driver and bomb it out there. So it's going to be interesting to see what Stricker does.
Yeah, the U.S. team has really benefited, from the home games of these big Midwestern golf courses with very little rough. On the flip side, Whistling Straits is more penal off the fairway than those other ones. So, and if you wanted to make a case, you could say the Austin Golf Club, where Kisner won the WGC match play and finished second. That's also a Pete Dye design like Whistling Straits. But I was looking. Whistling only tips out at 7,200 yards, which I was a little bit surprised by. But you look at the guys who've had success there, and it's a lot of big hitters. Spieth almost did win in 2015, but ultimately Jason Day was just blasting it over bunkers to win there. DJ almost won if he didn't ground his club in a bunker. Bubba was in the playoff with Keimer. It's still going to be a place, like you said, where I think length's always an advantage, but still will be there.
Dustin Johnson, 17 going into the FedEx Cup playoffs. How about that? Dustin Johnson right now is 17th. Rory and Tiger were the only 2 FedEx Cup winners, and no one has done it back to back. You think DJ can get this thing together and get himself another one?
You talk about what a difference a week makes, what a difference a year makes. I mean, DJ was like unbeatable he wins the Northern Trust last year by 11, loses in a playoff the BMW, wins Tour Championship, wins the Masters by 5. I mean, the guy looked absolutely unbeatable, and it's just not been the case this year. I think there's probably too much ground to be made up. And a guy who doesn't have the greatest Eastlake record, he was helped by the starting strokes. He used those to his advantage last year. Xander shot the low 72 hole score. So I think it's going to be hard for him to make up ground at Eastlake, but things can change pretty quickly.
Yeah. Well, the guy that can make it up, because he does love Eastlake, that's Xander Schauffele. He's at 13. And starting, the gold medalist, starting to play some good golf. It's nice to see him put one away there. He struggled a little bit late on Sunday. Sam Burns.
Yeah. He had never converted a 54-hole lead in his tour career. He had 4 of them and hadn't won any of them. So the gold medal is huge. It's a great honor, but just I think also closing out that 54-hole lead was such a big deal for him.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. I thought that was probably meant the most to him than anything, just to shut it out. Sam Burns is at 10. I've said it. I think I'd pick Sam Burns on the Ryder Cup.
Yeah.
I think he's a fiery player. He's long. He's a great iron player, and he can putt. It's like, okay, his short game can get a little clunky, but you know what? Length, great irons, great putter, and he's a great competitor. You saw it with Horschel at the Zurich. They really gelled. I mean, you could see it. Like I don't know. I'm in on Sam Burns. I like that, everything about him in that locker room and on that golf course at the Ryder Cup.
And he got sidelined at like the worst possible time. He had to withdraw from Colonial with that back injury, and that's after he'd finished first and second in his last 2 starts. And then, he played great at the St. Jude. And I think it's a guy who he's got that chip on his shoulder as a Walker Cup snub, and so I think he's a guy that maybe doesn't get talked about enough. We saw all we need to see about how he handles pressure when he played with Tiger at the Honda. And he shot 68. He's a kid who doesn't even have a tour card. He's playing on a sponsor exemption. It gets paired with Tiger when Tiger's starting to become Tiger again. And he shoots a cool little 68 and beats Tiger by 2.
Yeah. That's he's an impressive player. He really is. I think Sam Burns is going to be around a long time. And it's easy to say, you win one. It's like, oh, he's going to win all the time, right? Sam Burns, to me, like when I saw that, it's like, that's the first of 6, 7, 8. Like that's kind of where I see it going with him. And
which is a good haul. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. There's Koepka at 15, DeChambeau at 7. How much you think we're going to hear from this feud over the next 3 weeks, and how big of a deal is it? Do you think it plays out in the Ryder Cup?
It can't help. I've got to think that maybe they'll tone it down for the sake of the Ryder Cup, but I mean,
Brooks
the real problem
tones it down.
Yeah, Brooks has to, because the problem for Bryson is I think Bryson's gotten tired of it and really doesn't want any part of it. But when people are just yelling it constantly, you've got to address it. And I thought there were some really good columns out of the St. Jude about it. It's kind of crossed the line from being a fun, kind of poking at each other to really, and Brooks took it to a certain level with the offer of the free beer for the people that got kicked out. But, from then on, it's crossed the line, and it's at this point, it is, I think, bullying, I would call it. It's not done in good spirit. It's not like, it's like what they did to Monty. It's not done, there's some guys that get a hard time, and it's done in good humor and a good spirit, but this is not that. And I think you're seeing the effects of it on Bryson. I think just, Bryson being thrown into the spotlight like he was after the US Open, I think you're starting to see the effects of the pressure and just the demands and of being in that spotlight. Because you've really seen, between the US Open collapse, the St. Jude, the Open debacle, you're starting to see a lot of, maybe cracks there that just from the amount of pressure of Bryson having to be Bryson all the time.
Yeah, I think that's well said. Yeah, I really do. And I think it is bullying. What's that? You can't reward people's behavior, like that on the golf course by sending them beer. That doesn't add up. So it'll be interesting to see where those two play out through the playoffs, because they're going to be certainly in the same spot for 3 weeks, and they'll be on the team too for the Ryder Cup, and it can't help. So Stricker's got some work to do when it comes to that. You get up to the top here, and of course, Morikawa's 1, Spieth 2, Cantlay 3. Incredible year for Harris English 4, and John Rahm 5. John Rahm can just stay away from the COVID, and and not
I don't think he can't get it again. I mean, he's, what is this, the 3rd positive test? I think.
2.
We've kind of forgotten about him, the guy that won the US Open so impressively, because he's been gone. He hasn't played since Memorial. No, or sorry, he hasn't played in forever. I mean, and then we also forget too that he was about to win Memorial by like 7 if he didn't, get the positive. A guy who probably isn't getting enough attention going in. And then I look at Answer. Answer was runner-up at Liberty National last time we played there, and just so scrappy. And then I tweeted it, the rare guy who gains strokes off the tee with accuracy instead of distance. He's like 160th in distance, but he's 7th in accuracy. He's just kind of an old-school player in that sense.
I think the biggest question mark inside the top 10 is Justin Thomas. I mean, his putter is a mess. And his putter has completely derailed him from playing the type of golf that we're used to seeing. Justin Thomas, who was one of the best iron players in the game, does enough with his driver usually, can hit incredible wedge shots, and then he put the putter in his hand. It looks like a foreign object. Like, he's lost his confidence with his putter, and he's the biggest question mark for me inside the top 10. The guy that's on the other side of that is Kokrak at 12, who basically extended his putter 1 inch, and all of a sudden he's one of the best putters in the world now. Yeah. And Kokrak's an interesting name. Can drive it long, pretty good iron player, great putter. So he's a guy that is playing for a lot here when you look at the Ryder Cup. That I think is another interesting name when you start looking at who you're going to pick. And I'll finish with this here. The guy at 16, right before DJ, is Cameron Smith. I think this is the best golf Cameron Smith has played. The most consistent. He's been a lot of fun to watch. And he's a guy that I think could just sneak and make a move here, on that 16 mark. They got some work to do. We know that. Schauffele at 13, we know what he can do, but just feels like Cameron Smith, just feels like his year. He's done a lot of great things. Has played some really good golf with all 14 clubs. So he's a guy that I've got my eye on too. Have
you visited Cameron Smith's barber in Jacksonville, Lee Trevino?
No, but I heard about him. Yes. Have you?
I have not. Okay. I've got a guy, but I guess he was named after Lee Trevino. They had the last name Trevino, and his dad said, "I'm going to name my son Lee." So.
If you had to pick right now, who wins this? In Atlanta. Colin Morikawa, his year. Spieth, he's back and just cherry on top.
It really is. I was in Tokyo and I watched Morikawa play, and the first couple of rounds were not great. And it just looked squirrely. And then all of a sudden you look up Sunday and he shot, I think, 63 to get into the playoff for the bronze medal. It was like the guy can do no wrong. I like Spieth, a good history at Eastlake. Man, I think
Spieth was top 10 too at Liberty in 19.
Pretty sure. that was when we were at the state of the slump where he was playing great Thursday, Friday.
Yeah.
And then Saturday, Sunday was a mess. And that's what happened there. I want to say he maybe in the 36-hole leader and then just couldn't keep it going. Right. But that's where we were in 2019 with the Spieth slump, is we were seeing signs, and we saw some signs at Liberty.
So he likes Liberty. He likes Eastlake. No one knows. Honestly, East Valley's new.
I'm going Xander.
Okay.
I think he plays well the next 2 weeks to kind of get into that 5-4 position, and then he just plays so well. He's automatic at Eastlake, and he just, whatever his deficit is, he overcomes it and wins the whole thing. Gold medal, FedEx Cup, perfect.
Love it.
One gets you $0, one gets you $15 million, and it averages out to $7.5 million a piece. So
that's what they're playing for, folks. $15 million is what they hand out at the end of August. And I love the timing right before the NFL starts. We get a little breather, and we'll pick it back up again out in California. And off we go with a little Ryder Cup sprinkled in there. And then a nice little break, I think, there at the end of November into December, which you're probably not looking forward to that at all, are you? Because you haven't been really working that hard, have you?
Yeah.
How many tournaments? 50?
It never ends. No. We get a week off after Tour Championship, and then we roll it right back out again. And then we got the Ryder Cup second week of the season. And then, even December, you got the Hero World Challenge. You got there's not much time off.
Yeah. Sean, I can't thank you enough. Go follow him on Twitter at PGA Tour S Martin, senior editor, PGAtour.com. Thanks for joining the pod, man.
Yeah. Thanks, Travis.